In this episode, we're going to take the mystery out of what it actually means to earn certified in the governance of enterprise IT, CGEIT, because brand new learners do best when the rules of the game are clear before they start playing. People often jump straight into memorizing terms, but that can backfire if you do not understand how the exam is structured, how scoring works, what the testing policies expect from you, and what a realistic study rhythm sounds like when you are learning through audio. The goal here is not to make you anxious about the exam, but to make you calm and methodical by giving you a simple mental model for how the test evaluates your thinking. Once you understand what is being measured and how you will be asked to show it, every later topic becomes easier to learn because you can hear it with exam ears. By the end, you should feel like you have a spoken plan you can follow without guessing what matters most. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to understand what this certification is really assessing, because the exam is not a trivia contest about technology features or brand names. CGEIT is designed to evaluate whether you can think like someone who governs enterprise IT, meaning you can connect IT decisions to business outcomes, manage risk and value at a leadership level, and create structures that make decisions consistent and accountable. That means many questions will be written to test judgment, prioritization, and the ability to select the best governance action, not just the definition of a word. When you are new to this field, it can feel unfair because several answers may sound reasonable, but the exam expects you to pick the one that fits governance principles and enterprise context best. You should expect that the correct choice often reflects what should be done first, or what most directly aligns with the organization's objectives and responsibilities. When you prepare with that mindset, you stop chasing perfect memorization and start building the reasoning patterns the exam rewards. Now let's talk about structure in a practical way, because test structure influences how you manage your time and your confidence. Professional certification exams typically use multiple-choice questions that are designed to separate surface familiarity from real understanding, and this one leans heavily into scenario-style prompts. A scenario prompt is not necessarily a long story, but it usually gives you a setting, a problem, and a decision point, then asks what should happen next or what is the best response. You should train yourself to listen for the governing problem hidden under the details, such as unclear decision rights, weak accountability, poor alignment, unmanaged risk, or missing performance measures. The exam also tends to use questions that ask for the most appropriate action, which is a clue that governance often follows a sequence: establish objectives, define authority, set roles, implement processes, then monitor and improve. If you internalize that sequence, many questions become simpler, because you can evaluate answers based on whether they fit the right layer of governance. Scoring is another area where beginners can accidentally create stress, so we will frame it in a way that supports good study behavior. Most certification exams are not scored as a simple percent correct, and they may use scaled scoring so that different versions of the exam remain comparable over time. The key takeaway is that your goal is not to chase a perfect raw score, but to reliably perform above the passing threshold across the range of topics the exam tests. That means you should avoid the trap of overstudying your favorite areas and understudying the ones that feel abstract, because scaled exams punish weak spots by presenting questions that expose gaps in your reasoning. Another practical point is that your experience during the exam will include uncertain moments where you do not feel 100% sure, and that is normal. A strong test taker is not someone who never feels uncertain, but someone who can make the best decision with limited information by using consistent principles. Your study plan should therefore build principle-based confidence, not just short-term recall. Policies matter because they shape the testing environment, and the testing environment shapes your performance. Even if you are the best student in the world, you can lose points by mismanaging time, losing focus under pressure, or getting rattled by a policy detail you did not expect. Think of exam policies as part of risk management for your own performance. You want predictable conditions so your brain can focus on reasoning. Common policy themes include identification requirements, check-in procedures, prohibited items, rules about breaks, and how the testing software behaves. You do not need to obsess over every rule today, but you do need to adopt a mindset of compliance and preparation so that nothing surprises you on test day. The biggest performance killers are not usually difficult questions, but disruptions like rushing because the clock feels unfamiliar or losing rhythm after an interruption. When you plan your study, you are also training for the test experience, so build habits that make calm focus your default. Time management on the exam is not just about reading quickly. It is about reading strategically. The hardest questions are often hard because they contain extra information that feels important but is actually background noise, and beginners often waste time trying to interpret every detail. A better approach is to identify the governance problem first, then read the answer options, then go back to the scenario for confirmation. You should also practice recognizing keywords that signal what the exam is really asking, such as best, first, most effective, or primary objective. Those words change the nature of the decision, because governance questions often have an order of operations. If you see first, you are being tested on sequencing and priorities, not on whether something is a good idea eventually. If you see most effective, you are being tested on impact and appropriateness, not on completeness. When you build this habit now, you reduce the feeling that the exam is trying to trick you, because you can explain to yourself why one answer is stronger. Another important exam skill is dealing with answer choices that are all partially correct. Governance is a real-world discipline, so multiple actions might help a situation, but the exam asks you to choose the action that best fits enterprise governance logic. A useful mental filter is to ask whether the answer establishes clarity, accountability, and alignment, or whether it simply reacts to a symptom. For example, if a scenario describes repeated project overruns, a reactive answer might focus on punishing a team or tightening a single report, while a governance-driven answer might focus on clarifying decision rights, improving portfolio oversight, or strengthening benefit tracking. The exam is usually looking for that governance layer rather than the immediate operational patch. Another filter is whether the answer creates repeatability, because governance is about turning good decisions into consistent habits across the organization. Finally, pay attention to whether an answer respects authority, because governance answers often emphasize who has the right to decide and how that authority is exercised. Because you are learning in an audio-first way, your study plan must be realistic about attention, repetition, and recall without relying on visuals. The biggest mistake audio learners make is treating listening like passive background noise while doing other intense tasks, then being surprised that nothing sticks. Audio learning works best when you can give it some dedicated attention, even if it is not long, and when you repeat core ideas across multiple sessions. Your plan should include a primary listen where you focus, a second listen where you test yourself by predicting what comes next, and short review listens where you reinforce key concepts. You also want to build a habit of pausing mentally after a big idea and asking yourself a simple question, like what problem does this solve, or what would go wrong if an organization ignored this? That small reflective step turns listening into learning because it forces your brain to organize information, not just hear it. Over time, those habits build the kind of comprehension the exam expects. A spoken study plan also needs to help you handle new terminology without turning your brain into a glossary. Governance has a lot of terms that sound similar, like framework, policy, standard, process, control, and objective, and beginners often try to memorize them as separate definitions. A better approach is to learn them as a system of related ideas. A framework is the overall way of organizing governance, including who decides, how decisions are made, and how performance is measured. Policies state what must be true or what must be followed. Standards make policies consistent by defining specific requirements. Processes describe repeatable activities. Controls reduce risk by enforcing behavior or verifying outcomes. And objectives define what success looks like. When you hear a term in a later episode, you should mentally place it in that system rather than treating it as a random fact. This system approach also helps on scenario questions, because you can identify whether a situation needs an objective, a policy, a process improvement, or a control, and that guides you toward the strongest answer choice. You will also study more effectively if you understand how domain weight and topic breadth usually influence exam preparation. While you do not need to memorize a blueprint during this episode, you should recognize that governance certifications often test across several related areas, such as establishing governance frameworks, aligning IT with business strategy, managing benefits and value, and ensuring risk and compliance are handled through governance rather than through last-minute fixes. Your plan should therefore avoid spending all your time on one concept, even if it feels easier or more interesting. Instead, you want a rotation that repeatedly touches each major area so your understanding stays balanced. Think of it like training multiple muscles rather than only one, because the exam will not allow you to hide a weakness by doing extra well in a single topic. A balanced plan also keeps your listening experience fresh, because revisiting different angles on governance prevents the content from blurring together. Practice, in an audio-first setting, should focus on the skill of choosing the best answer, not on memorizing the one correct phrase. When you review questions, whether they are official or practice, you should train yourself to explain why each wrong option is weaker, not just why the right one is correct. That is important because scenario questions often reuse the same concepts with slightly different wording, and the exam writers are testing whether you recognize the underlying pattern. If you can say, this option is reactive, this one ignores authority, this one skips defining objectives, and this one aligns decisions and accountability, then you are thinking like a governance professional. Another useful habit is to summarize each question in one sentence in your own words, focusing on the governance issue, not the story details. That teaches you to cut through noise and see what is being tested, which is exactly what you need when the clock is running and stress is present. Let's address a common misconception that can cause new learners to study the wrong way. That governance is the same thing as management, and the exam is mostly about project management or technical controls. Governance and management are related, but they are not identical, and the exam tends to test whether you can keep them distinct. Governance is about setting direction, defining decision rights, establishing oversight, and ensuring accountability for outcomes, while management is about executing plans, running processes, and delivering work within the structures governance creates. If you treat governance like management, you will choose answers that focus on doing tasks rather than establishing the conditions that make good decisions repeatable. Another misconception is that governance is just paperwork, but good governance reduces confusion and conflict by making responsibilities and priorities explicit. If you study with the belief that governance is bureaucracy, you may resist learning it, and you may misread exam questions as pointless, when they are actually asking how leaders prevent chaos at scale. As you move through this course, you will benefit from a simple weekly rhythm that keeps you progressing without burning out. A good baseline for brand new learners is to schedule several short learning sessions rather than a few long ones, because understanding governance takes repeated exposure to connect the ideas. During your first pass through content, your goal is comprehension, meaning you can explain concepts in your own words. During your second pass, your goal becomes application, meaning you can recognize where a concept applies in a scenario. During your third pass, your goal becomes exam readiness, meaning you can make decisions quickly and consistently using principles rather than hesitation. You should also plan for occasional review days where you do not add new content, but instead reinforce what you already learned, because spaced repetition is especially important for audio learning. This rhythm makes progress feel steady, and it reduces last-minute cramming, which is one of the most reliable ways to increase stress and reduce performance. Before we wrap up, it helps to define what success looks like for the next few episodes, because a study plan works best when it has clear milestones. Your first milestone is to build a mental map of governance concepts so that terms like framework, decision rights, accountability, alignment, and value are not isolated ideas but connected parts of a single system. Your second milestone is to get comfortable with the idea that scenario questions are testing judgment and sequencing, so you learn to look for what should happen first and what best aligns with enterprise objectives. Your third milestone is to develop calm test behavior, meaning you can manage time, remain focused, and accept that uncertainty is normal without spiraling. Those milestones are more important than raw hours studied, because they represent the capabilities the exam measures. If you keep those targets in mind, every listening session becomes purposeful rather than random. The result is that you do not just know more. You think more clearly in the way the certification expects. To close, Remember that understanding exam rules, scoring, and policies is not a distraction from learning governance, but the foundation that makes your learning efficient and less stressful. When you know the exam is evaluating governance judgment, you stop trying to memorize everything and start building principles you can apply under pressure. When you understand that scoring rewards consistent performance across topics, you build a balanced study rhythm rather than chasing comfort zones. When you respect testing policies and prepare for the environment, you reduce the risk of disruption and protect your focus on the day that matters. Most importantly, when you adopt a spoken study plan that uses focused listening, repetition, reflection, and pattern recognition, you turn audio into a powerful way to learn complex ideas without needing visual crutches. With that foundation in place, you are ready to begin learning what governance of enterprise IT really means and how leaders use it to make decisions that hold up in the real world and on the exam.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.